Why filing for Social Security early at age 62 might be the right move. Let's break it down on this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. Today we're talking about Social Security and some reasons why it might be the right move to claim it early as even age 62, which is the earliest you can claim your benefit. Oftentimes, there's a lot of content out there and a lot of information on the benefits of delaying Social Security and strategies around delaying it to maximize, your benefit over your lifetime, and rightfully so. I think there's a lot of good reasons to delay Social Security. But there are also really good reasons to claim it early. As early as age 62, right? That's the earliest you can claim it. But at age 63, 64, anytime before what they call your full retirement age, right? And your full retirement age is around 67. It's usually, 67 in so many months. And if you claim before there, that's deemed claiming early. And if you delay it after there, you're delaying your benefit. And it increases, once you delay past your full retirement age, it increases year over year, something like 8% a year, right? Now, as the benefit increases, or let's say you're claiming early, right? So you get a decreased benefit. It's determined on a monthly basis, right? Not on a annual basis. So if you claim it, 62 and 6 months, you still get credit for those 6 months of delaying, right? It's not just based off of years. And so a lot of times, like I said, you see a lot of content on the benefits of delaying. And if your goal is to maximize the total amount of your benefit over your life, you typically see in these graphs that they show, a break even around age 80 on where you're going to make out because you delayed, right? But again, that's not always the best situation, and everybody's situation is different. There's a lot of factors that go into this. Okay, so let's dive right in here on some good reasons to claim Social Security early. Let's start with meeting immediate financial needs, paying off high interest debt, right? So if you need the money, if you have high interest debt, or even if you're working at like a physically demanding job and you just can't retire without claiming Social Security early, but you got to get out of this job, it's beating you up, that's a good reason to claim early. You need the funds, right? If you need it, either to avoid, worse financial situations, whether that's through debt or whatever it might be, or you just gotta claim it, right? To achieve a certain desired way of life, right? Your job's too hard. I just got to get out of here. I got to claim it early and I'll figure it out. That might be the best situation. If you need it, you need it, right? Now, if you can afford to delay it, then there's a lot of good reasons and things you should consider about delaying it. Okay, let's look on to life expectancy, right? And this is where we get into the break even. And life expectancy, it's one of those really difficult ones because there's just no knowing, right? One thing I want to point out about life expectancy is a lot of times people look at the U.S. average life expectancy, right, for a male or female. But that's not always maybe the best target. And what I mean by that is if you look at the average life expectancy for a male or female, a male's around 75, 76 years old, right? And a female around 81. Okay, but that number changes as you get older, right? So I looked at some 2024 data. I didn't see the 2025, but so like as of 2024, if you're already a 60-year-old male, then your average life expectancy is 80.4 years old, right? The overall life expectancy in the U.S. for a male is 75 to 76. But what they're saying is if you're healthy enough and hardy enough to make it all the way to 60, the odds are you're going to live another 20 years, right, to 80. So you can see how the benchmark kind of moved there. The goalpost moved with life expectancy. Same is true for females, right? If a female makes it to age 60, years old, then she can expect to live another 23.7 years. And her average life expectancy goes from 81 all the way up to close to 84 years old. Right? So using average life expectancy to figure this out is okay, but just understand it's a lot more nuanced than that. And just because there's average life expectancy, your unique health and family history is different than everybody else's, right? If you have a condition early on, and you believe, that's really going to limit my life expectancy, then there's a great reason to claim early, right? Or you could look at family history, right? Like, hey, both of my parents, they had a lot of health issues and passed away early. This is my justification, my reason for claiming early. That makes sense, right? It's a good kind of practice and situation to go through in your head of, what can I look at and how can I determine what I think my life expectancy is going to be? Now, just like in retirement planning, you kind of want to err on the conservative side, right? Because you don't want to run out of money when you're doing retirement planning and you're looking at your retirement portfolio as a distribution portfolio, and you start taking distributions. What you don't want to do is run out right at the end, because that leads to a whole bunch of problems. Now, you don't want to leave too much in there either, right? Because if you leave too much, that's money unspent, life unlived. So that's kind of the paradox, and that's where you kind of have to ebb and flow and do the best you can. But I always try to err on, the conservative side of these decisions. Okay, so let's move over to the impact on your investment portfolio, why you'd want to claim early. And the concept here is, well, if I claim early, I can collect my Social Security, pay my bills, live the lifestyle I want, and minimize or delay entirely taking distributions from my investments, my retirement portfolio, and I can let that grow longer, right? And it becomes bigger. And, that makes sense. There are RMD considerations that'll play into it. Eventually, you'll have to start taking money out if it's a tax-deferred retirement account. I would say most people look at it the other way. Okay? And I'm not saying one is right or wrong here. I'm just pointing out different perspectives. I have my own opinions, but most people look at it the other way, and they'll say, well, actually, I really value the secure, steady monthly income that Social Security provides, right? Because my investments, there's volatility, there's a lot of variables that play into the performance and how much, inflation, how much distributions are going to be able to take out safely and make my portfolio last. And then there's RMDs and taxes. Some people really value the secure, steady, inflation adjusted, right? It's not, maybe it doesn't completely keep up with, real inflation, but it is inflation adjusted, Social Security benefits, right? And if you value that, you might take the opposite approach. You might say, well, you know what? I'm going to delay Social Security and I'm going to start taking distributions from my retirement accounts to fund my lifestyle, my minimum, dignity floor, right? So 2 trains of thought. Now, again, I'm not going to say, one is right or wrong. I have my opinions, but you may say, I'm going to claim early, and for whatever reason, everybody's situation different. I'm going to claim early so I can not touch my investments and let them grow, right? Possible reason. So let's move on to, it's kind of spousal and family benefits, right? So with Social Security, a lot of people get confused with there's survivor benefits, which is benefits when one spouse passes away, and there's spousal benefits, which is while your spouse is living, right? They can top up their own benefit to up to half of the higher spouse's benefit, right? That's the spousal. The survivor benefit, if the higher earning spouse, the higher benefit Social Security benefit spouse passes away, then the other spouse steps up into their shoes and starts collecting that higher benefit, right? Survivor and spousal benefits. And I did episodes on those a while back. So when you start looking at those, then some planning considerations come into play here. One could be with the spousal benefit is your spouse, if they're going to collect a spousal benefit, meaning they're going to top up their own benefit to half of what yours is, they can't claim the spousal benefit, right, until you turn on yours. So you have to turn on yours before the spouse can claim the spousal benefit, right? And so there's a lot of strategies we could go on and on about the different strategies within the spousal benefits and survivor benefits. But it's important to understand there could be a reason why you want to turn it on early for a spouse or even family benefits, right? Maybe it's dependents. There's different dependents for, I'm not an expert on this, but like disabled children, or, it could happen where you're old enough to collect and you have children under the age of 18. There's also benefits available to them, right? Unlikely, but possible, right? So these family benefits or spousal claiming strategies could be a reason you want to claim early. Now, I'll say this for the spousal strategies. The most common one I see, which makes a lot of sense, but there's no one size fits all. Everybody's situation is different, and you should seek professional help if you can't figure it out on your own, but spend some time and think it over for yourself. But the most common one I see is typically the highest earning spouse, the spouse with the highest Social Security benefit, will delay as long as they can. And so they lock in that highest benefit for themselves or their spouse if they pass away, right? So as a couple, you locked in the highest of the two benefits, so you know it's going to be there for one of the two spouses, right? Now the second spouse, right? So if one delays all the way to, let's say they delayed to age 70, and they locked in that high benefit, so no matter if they pass away, that'll carry on to the other spouse. Now the other spouse might say, well, we locked in that higher one. I'm going to claim mine a little earlier than I, would have anticipated, because we're not so concerned, because our primary concern was locking in that higher one, right? And this gets very nuanced, but that is a common strategy that I see, and I think there's a lot of reasons why it's very common. But I just want to not get too deep in the weeds here and a rabbit hole on the spousal and the and survivor benefits. But I just want to point out it is a reason or a potential reason why you may consider claiming your Social Security benefit early. Okay, before we wrap it up here, one reason I don't think is a good reason to claim your Social Security early is out of fear. Out of fear for the Social Security system failing, right? And we hear a lot of this on the news, and we read a lot of this in articles and whatnot about, the Social Security program is going to come up to hard times here. I don't think it's going away. I could be wrong. Nobody knows what the future holds, but it's such an important system to this country, to this society. It's such an important system that I feel it has to continue on in some capacity. There's going to be tweaks. There's going to be changes. There has to be. And that might be delaying, your full retirement age. It could be how they tax it. Maybe, right now it's taxed up to 85%. Maybe they change that. Maybe they initiate some tax outside of the Social Security program that supplements the Social Security program, right? That has not really tied in, but it pays in to make sure the program continues to operate. I don't know. But I don't like the idea of claiming out of fear that the Social Security system is failing. That's just me. I could be wrong. Nobody knows what the future holds. But personally, I do not like that rationale for claiming early. Okay, so I think that wraps it up. I gave you some good reasons, right? We talked about the spousal and the family reasons, how you want to look at your investment portfolio and how Social Security ties into when you're going to take distributions and when you're going to delay, life expectancy considerations, right? You got to look at, average life expectancy, your health, your family's health, and then obviously meeting financial needs and paying off high interest debt, right? If you need the funds, you need the funds. There's just no way around that, right? If you're going to put yourself in a worse situation for delaying, there's no sense in doing that. I'll just leave you with this. Social Security, is very straightforward and simple. It can be very complicated and convoluted, right? We didn't talk about there's divorce spouse benefits if you're married for 10 years. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into it, and it is highly individualized, right? What we didn't talk about is maybe you have a pension. Maybe you have both spouses have a pension. Well, that kind of changes things, right? Well, how you would look at when to claim Social Security if you have all this secure income, right? And we just don't know, right? Maybe you have a lot of real estate. Maybe you have a ton of investments. Maybe you have, a tax allocation that you need to diversify some way, right? There's just so much that goes into this. But I just thought I'd come on here for this one and talk about some good reasons and considerations for claiming early. All right, if there's anything in particular you'd like me to talk about on the show going forward, email it over to aloha@hawaiiretirementshow.com, and we'll catch everyone on the next one.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Katita and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Katita, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.